He was 30 minutes away from the most important wedding in Seoul's underworld when the photograph arrived. Not a text. Not a call. A single photograph slipped under his dressing room door. The paper still warm as if it had traveled across continents to find him. 2 children. 4 years old. His eyes staring back at him from faces he'd never seen. His smile, that crooked half-grin his mother always said made him look mischievous, replicated perfectly on 2 small faces. His entire carefully constructed world exploding in one image, in pixels and paper, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The wedding planner knocked, her voice urgent through the heavy mahogany door. 200 guests waited in the Grand Hyatt ballroom. Their presence a carefully orchestrated display of power and alliance. The daughter of the Busan syndicate stood in white silk 3 doors down. Her fate as predetermined as his own had been. $70 million in alliance money rode on this marriage, on the joining of 2 criminal empires that stretched from Seoul to San Francisco. His father had survived 3 heart attacks orchestrating this union, each one bringing him closer to the grave he was determined to avoid until this alliance was secured. And Jin-woo Park stood frozen, absolutely frozen, staring at 2 faces he'd never seen but somehow always known, as if his soul had been calling to them across the years of separation. The twins ask about their father every day. That's what the note said. 7 words. Handwritten in that distinctive script he'd memorized long ago. Her handwriting. Nana's handwriting. Nana Mensa, the woman he hadn't spoken to in 5 years, hadn't held in 6, hadn't loved openly in what felt like forever. The woman who vanished from Columbia University without explanation one autumn morning, leaving only a letter that said she couldn't do this anymore, couldn't be what he needed, couldn't survive in his world where everything beautiful eventually got crushed under the weight of duty and blood. He'd spent 2 years trying to find her, hiring private investigators who came back empty-handed, following false leads to Chicago, to Atlanta to London. Another year trying to forget, drowning himself in work and women who weren't her. The last year preparing to marry someone else, someone appropriate, someone his father approved of, someone who understood that love was a luxury people like them couldn't afford. But those children. God, those children. Jin-woo's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, the device feeling heavy as a weapon. His security chief answered on the first ring, professionally alert as always. Find out everything about Nana Mensa. Current location. Current situation. Everything about her life for the past 5 years. And find out now. His voice came out harder than he intended. The commanding tone his father had drilled into him since childhood. He had 28 minutes until he was supposed to walk down that aisle. 28 minutes to decide if he was going to destroy everything his family built over 70 years, or destroy the only thing that ever made him feel human, that ever made him believe he could be more than his father's weapon. The door opened without permission. His younger brother Min-jae stepped in, already knowing everything because Min-jae always knew. That's what made him dangerous in their world. That's what made him indispensable to their father. Min-jae had the gift of seeing 3 moves ahead, of understanding how power flowed through invisible channels, of knowing where to press to make empires bend. She's in Brooklyn. Crown Heights. Works 2 jobs to keep them fed. Min-jae's voice was flat, emotionless, delivering information like a news report. Waitress at night at a Caribbean restaurant on Nostrand Avenue. Medical billing during the day for a clinic in Bed-Stuy. The twins are in public school. PS 221. She's 3 months behind on rent. Her landlord's been patient, but that patience is running out. Your father's people have known for 6 months. The room tilted. 6 months. His father knew for 6 months and said nothing. Let him plan this wedding, attend fittings, smile beside a woman he respected but didn't love. Let him believe the lie that duty was enough, that honor could fill the spaces where happiness used to live. Let him think he'd successfully buried every soft part of himself deep enough that it wouldn't matter. Why didn't she tell me? Jin-woo's voice came out wrong, broken in places it shouldn't be, revealing vulnerability his father taught him to hide. Why didn't she? Min-jae closed the door behind him, the click of the lock deliberate. Because the last time she saw father, he offered her $2 million to disappear. Because she was 5 weeks pregnant and terrified of what that meant in our world. Because loving you meant her children would be targets their entire lives. bargaining chips in games played by men who don't understand the word mercy. She chose survival. Can you blame her? No. He couldn't. That was the thing about Nana that haunted him most, that kept him awake at night even when he thought he'd moved on. She'd always been the smartest person in any room. The one who saw 3 moves ahead just like Min-jae. The one who understood that his world ate soft things alive and called it strength. She'd loved him anyway. Loved him fiercely, completely, with a passion that made him believe he could change, could be better, could build something clean. And when that love threatened to consume her, when she realized his father would never let her be more than a liability, she'd been strong enough to walk away. But she hadn't walked away alone. She'd carried pieces of him inside her, grown them, raised them, loved them in ways he'd never been loved, with the kind of unconditional acceptance his father thought was weakness. And his father had known, had watched from a distance, had calculated that secret as leverage for some future play, some moment when it would be useful to have grandchildren he could control or threaten, or use to keep his eldest son in line. The knock came again, harder this time, more insistent. 5 minutes, young master. The guests are getting restless. The bride's father is asking questions. Jin-woo looked at his brother. Min-jae's face showed nothing, that perfect mask their father had taught them both to wear. But his eyes said everything. This is your only chance. Choose now. Choose fast. There's no coming back from whatever happens next. The wedding would unite 2 of Korea's most powerful criminal organizations. It would cement his father's legacy, make the Park name untouchable for a generation. Open doors that had been closed for decades. Walking away meant war. Meant his father's enemies would sense weakness like sharks scenting blood. Meant everyone who smiled at this wedding might be dead within a year, caught in the crossfire of fragmenting alliances and power vacuums. But those children had his eyes. And Nana had survived 5 years alone rather than trap him in a life he didn't choose. Rather than use her pregnancy as leverage the way anyone else in their world would have. Jin-woo straightened his tie with fingers that wouldn't quite stop shaking. Adjusted his cufflinks, expensive platinum things that cost more than Nana made in 3 months. Looked at himself in the mirror one last time as the man he was supposed to be. The heir, the weapon, the perfect son who did what was required without question. Then he opened the door and walked past his brother, past the wedding planner whose face went pale, past the ballroom where 200 people waited for a union that would never happen. He walked straight to his father's private room, each step feeling like crossing a threshold from one life to another. The old man sat surrounded by his closest advisors, men whose combined net worth exceeded several small nations, men whose decisions shaped policy from Seoul to San Francisco to Tokyo. They fell silent when Jin-woo entered, the weight of his presence disrupting whatever strategy they'd been discussing. His father didn't look up from the whiskey he was pouring, the amber liquid catching the light. He already knew. Of course he knew. Park Dae-young always knew. You saw the photograph. It wasn't a question. His father's voice was rough, aged by cigarettes and decades of giving orders that ended lives. How long have you been watching her? Long enough to know she's struggling. Long enough to know those children need stability, proper education, proper protection. Long enough to know that if you walk out of this wedding, I will cut you off from everything. His father finally looked up, those eyes like frozen rivers in winter. The money, the protection, the name. You'll have nothing. Jin-woo stood straighter, feeling something crystallize inside him. Then I'll have everything that matters. His father's expression didn't change. 63 years old. 3 bullets still lodged in his spine from gang wars older than Jin-woo. From the days when the Park organization was fighting for survival rather than dominance. Eyes that had seen men beg for mercy and found none. You think love is enough? You think some Ghanaian girl and 2 children are worth burning down everything I built? No. Jin-woo's voice was steady now, certain in ways it had never been. As if walking toward this moment had given him clarity. I think they're worth building something better. Something that doesn't require destroying the people we love to prove we're strong. The room erupted. Advisors shouting about dishonor, about the insult to the Busan family, about weakness and consequences, and the old ways that had kept them safe for decades. His father raised one hand and silence fell like a guillotine, absolute and immediate. If you leave this building, You're dead to this family. I will not acknowledge those children. I will not acknowledge that woman. And when the Busan family comes for blood, and they will come, I will not protect you. Jin-woo nodded once, accepting the terms. Then I'll protect myself. He turned and walked out. Behind him, his father's voice followed, softer now, almost human beneath the anger. You're throwing away an empire for a fantasy. For children you've never met and a woman who left you. Jin-woo didn't look back. I'm trading an empire for a family. There's a difference. And she didn't leave me. I failed to protect her from this world. I won't make that mistake again. The ballroom doors loomed ahead. Inside, the string quartet played something classical and expensive. The bride waited, probably knowing by now that something was wrong. The future his father designed sparkled under crystal chandeliers, perfect and cold and empty. Jin-woo pulled out his phone and texted his driver, "Airport. Now. JFK." Then he texted Nana for the first time in 5 years, his fingers trembling over the keys. "I'm coming. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I didn't protect you. I'm coming." He didn't wait for a response. He walked past those ballroom doors, past the gasps of guests who saw him leaving in his wedding attire, past the bride's father whose face promised violence and retribution, past the entire carefully orchestrated machine of his father's world. He walked into the Seoul night and didn't look back, didn't let himself think about what he was leaving behind, only about what he was running toward. 13 hours later, Jin-woo stood outside a fourth-floor walk-up in Crown Heights. The building needed paint desperately, the facade crumbling in places. The stairs creaked under his weight, protesting each step. This was so far from the world he knew, from penthouses and security details and spaces designed to intimidate, that it might as well have been another planet. But he climbed those stairs anyway, each step feeling like choosing life over survival, love over legacy, hope over the certainty of his father's approval. He knocked, heard movement inside, the sound of someone checking the peephole, heard a woman's voice he'd memorized 5 years ago telling someone to stay in their room, to wait just a moment. The door opened and Jin-woo forgot how to breathe. Nana looked exactly the same and completely different. Still beautiful in ways that made his chest hurt. Her skin still glowing like polished mahogany. Those eyes still seeing straight through every defense he'd ever built. But tired now. Worn down by years of doing everything alone. Of working 2 jobs while raising 2 children. Of being both mother and father because she'd chosen their safety over his presence. She stared at him like he was a ghost. Maybe he was. Maybe the Jin-woo she loved had died the day she left Columbia. Maybe this was someone new, someone trying to be better. "You actually came." Her voice trembled, that beautiful Ghanaian accent stronger than he remembered, stress bringing it back to the surface. "I should have come 5 years ago. I should have looked harder. I should have. I never told you because I know why. And I understand. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Not unless you tell me to." A small face appeared around her legs, curious and cautious. Then another, braver, pushing forward. 2 pairs of eyes that mirrored his own stared up with the kind of innocent curiosity that exists before the world teaches you to be afraid. A boy and a girl. 4 years old. His entire world compressed into 2 small humans who didn't know they'd just saved him from a life he never wanted. From becoming the man his father tried so hard to create. "Are you our daddy?" The little girl's question cut through every defense he'd ever built. Every wall he'd constructed to protect himself from feeling too much. Jin-woo dropped to one knee, making himself their height, meeting their eyes directly. "Yes, I am. And I'm so sorry I didn't know about you sooner. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you were born. When you took your first steps, when you said your first words." The little boy stepped forward, suspicious in ways 4-year-olds shouldn't be, already learning that the world requires caution. "Mama said you were busy being important." The words landed like bullets, each one finding its mark. Nana's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall, her pride too strong to break down in front of him. She'd protected him even in this. Even in absence, even in the loneliness of raising their children alone. She'd made him a hero instead of a villain. She'd told their children their father was important, not that he was ignorant of their existence. Not that his family would have destroyed them all given the chance. "I was trying to be important." Jin-woo's voice cracked, every practiced bit of control deserting him. But I was wrong about what important means. You two are important. Your mama is the most important person I've ever known. Everything else is just noise. The little girl reached out with one tiny hand and touched his face, her fingers gentle and curious. You look like us. Yes. Yes, I do. Jin-woo felt tears on his cheeks and didn't care, didn't try to hide them the way his father taught him. Are you staying? The boy's question carried the weight of previous disappointments, of people who promised things and didn't deliver. The question hung in the narrow hallway of a Brooklyn walk-up, heavy with implications Jin-woo was just beginning to understand. Staying meant his father's threats would come true. Staying meant the Busan syndicate would send people. Staying meant war would follow him across the Pacific and land on this doorstep where his children slept, where Nana worked herself to exhaustion trying to provide. But staying also meant bedtime stories. Meant scraped knees he could bandage. Meant watching them grow up instead of seeing them in photographs slipped under doors. Meant loving Nana the way he should have loved her from the beginning, without conditions, without the weight of empires crushing everything soft between them, without his father's voice in his head saying she wasn't suitable, wasn't enough, wasn't what the Park family needed. Yes. Jin-woo looked at Nana over their children's heads, seeing everything in her eyes. Hope and fear and love and exhaustion. If you'll let me, I'm staying forever. I'm staying and I'm going to make up for every day I missed. I'm going to be the father they deserve and the man you deserved 5 years ago. Nana's carefully constructed walls finally crumbled. She nodded, tears streaming freely now, and Jin-woo stood, pulling all three of them into his arms. They fit perfectly, like pieces he'd been missing without knowing he was incomplete. The little boy smelled like grape juice and the little girl like the strawberry shampoo Nana must use. And Nana still smelled like cocoa butter and hope. That scent that used to cling to his clothes after nights in her dorm room when the world felt manageable. But perfect moments don't last in the underworld. They never have. They never will. 3 days later his brother called. Jin-woo had rented an apartment 2 floors down from Nana, not wanting to presume, not wanting to move too fast. But the twins came down every morning for breakfast, and Nana joined them for dinner, and slowly they were becoming something like a family. Father had a stroke. Min-jae's voice was flat, delivering bad news with practiced efficiency. He's asking for you. Well, not asking. Demanding. You know how he is. Jin-woo sat in the small apartment he'd rented, furnished with cheap IKEA furniture that wobbled when you moved it. The twins were in school. Nana was at her morning job. He was supposed to be job hunting, learning how normal people survived without blood money and offshore accounts. Instead, he was learning that leaving his father's world didn't mean his father's world would leave him. How bad? Bad enough that the doctors give him weeks, maybe a month if he's lucky. Bad enough that the Busan family is circling. Bad enough that without you, everything falls apart. The organization is fragmenting. That's not my problem anymore. Min-jae's laugh was bitter, sharp as broken glass. You really think you can just walk away? You're his eldest son. His heir. The family doesn't care that you found conscience in Brooklyn. They care that leadership is fragmenting and wolves are at the door. Then let them come. They will come. And when they do, they won't stop at father's door. They'll find every loose thread, every vulnerability, every person you ever cared about. Min-jae paused, letting the threat sink in. Tell me, brother, how long do you think Nana and those children stay safe when every syndicate in Korea knows you abandoned your post? When they know the great Jin-woo Park has a weakness they can exploit? The words hit like they were designed to, because Min-jae wasn't just his brother. Min-jae was his father's son in ways Jin-woo never managed to be. Calculating. Cold. Willing to use love as a weapon. To press on pressure points without remorse. What do you want? Come home. Take your place. Marry the Busan girl like you were supposed to. Save the family. I'll make sure Nana and the children are protected. Set them up somewhere safe, comfortable. You can visit. Have your secret family, and your duty too. Everyone gets something. Jin-woo closed his eyes, feeling the trap closing. This was always how it would go, wasn't it? His father taught him that love was weakness, that caring was liability. But Jin-woo learned something else in 5 years without Nana, in the years of feeling incomplete without understanding why. Learned that duty without love was just slavery in expensive suits. Learned that the empire his father built was a prison that devoured sons and called it legacy. No. No. I'm not coming back. I'm not marrying anyone. And if you think I'll abandon my family to save father's empire, you never knew me at all. Min-jae was quiet for a long time. Jin-woo could hear him breathing, could imagine his brother's face going through calculations. Then you condemn us all. The Busan family won't accept this insult. They'll burn everything father built. Every alliance, every treaty, every careful balance maintained over decades. And they'll come for you last, so you can watch everyone you love suffer first. Then I'll be ready. Jin-woo hung up. His hands shook. He'd just declared war on the most powerful criminal organization in Korea. From a rented apartment in Brooklyn that costs $1,200 a month. With no money beyond what he'd managed to withdraw before his accounts were frozen. No protection except his wits, and no plan beyond keeping his children safe. He was either the bravest man alive or the stupidest. The door opened. Nana stood there with grocery bags, looking at his face and knowing immediately that their borrowed peace was over. She had that gift, had always been able to read him better than he could read himself. They called. She set down the bags carefully, precisely, the way she did everything when she was afraid. When? Just now. Father's dying. They want me back. Want me to marry the Busan girl, stabilize everything. And you said? No. Nana sat down beside him on the cheap couch, so close their shoulders touched. Jin-woo, I can't ask you to choose us over your family. I can't carry that weight. If you need to go. You're not asking. I'm choosing. There's a difference. He turned to face her fully. 5 years ago, I let you walk away because I was a coward. Because I believed my father when he said love was weakness. I'm not making that mistake again. She touched his face the way their daughter had 3 days ago, looking for truth in the lines around his eyes, in the set of his jaw. What happens now? Now we prepare. Because they're coming, and when they arrive, they need to find something they didn't expect. What's that? A man who's not afraid to lose everything because he already has everything that matters. Over the next 2 weeks, Jin-woo did something his father never taught him. Something that went against every lesson about trust and loyalty and keeping secrets. He reached out for help to people who didn't owe him favors, people who operated outside the careful hierarchies of organized crime. He called former Columbia classmates who worked in law, in media, in technology. People who'd known him before he fully understood what his father's business meant. People who remembered him as just another international student trying to figure out his place in the world. He documented everything he knew about his father's organization and deposited it with lawyers who would release it if anything happened to him or his family. Not just Korean lawyers who might be intimidated or bought. American lawyers with connections to the FBI, to the DEA, to agencies his father's influence couldn't reach. He built a different kind of protection. Not the kind that came from fear or muscle, or the threat of violence. The kind that came from exposure, from making himself valuable alive and dangerous dead. From ensuring that his death or the death of his family would trigger consequences his enemies couldn't afford. And he waited. The knock came on a Tuesday. 3 men in expensive suits. Polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They asked to speak with Jin-woo Park regarding important family matters. The building supervisor, Mrs. Chun, who loved the twins and thought Jin-woo was a nice young man trying to make good, told them he'd moved to Flushing and she didn't have a forwarding address. They didn't believe her. But they also couldn't afford to make a scene in a Brooklyn neighborhood where everyone watched everyone else's business, and cops actually responded to calls. So they left business cards with numbers that would never be answered and threats wrapped in courtesy. Jin-woo watched from Nana's window. He'd moved his things up the day before, stopped pretending they weren't building a life together. The twins called him daddy now without hesitation. He'd learned to braid hair and make breakfast and read bedtime stories in English instead of Korean. He'd learned to be happy in ways his father would never understand. But happiness in the underworld is always temporary. His father died on a Thursday. The funeral was Saturday. Jin-woo didn't attend. Min Jae sent one text. You should have been here. Now it's too late for peace. The translation was clear. His absence at the funeral was the final insult. The Busan family would demand satisfaction. And satisfaction in their world came in blood. Jin-woo increased security. He hired 2 former Special Forces soldiers who'd gone private sector. Not muscle from his father's world. Not men who carried the stench of organized crime. Clean operators who asked questions and didn't like what they heard about Korean syndicates targeting children. They'd both served in Afghanistan, had seen enough real evil to recognize it when briefed. He moved Nana and the twins to a safe house in New Jersey. A friend's cousin's property that existed in legal gray areas and couldn't be traced back to him through normal channels. The twins thought it was an adventure, camping out in a new place. Nana knew better. She packed efficiently, her face calm but her eyes showing the fear she wouldn't voice in front of the children. And he prepared for the inevitable confrontation, knowing it would come, knowing that men like his father's associates didn't accept insults or defeats. They responded. Always. It came on a Sunday morning. For men this time. Better dressed than the first group. Better mannered. Carrying briefcases instead of guns because this was America and they were smart enough to know the rules were different here. That violence had to be subtle, that intimidation worked better when wrapped in civility. They sat in the living room of his Brooklyn apartment. The same room where his children played with blocks 2 days before. The same room where he'd kissed Nana and promised everything would be fine. Lies we tell to make the darkness bearable. To convince ourselves we have more control than we do. The lead negotiator spoke in Korean. Formal. Respectful. His father's generation. When honor still meant something more than leverage. When certain codes were followed even in violence. Your father's death creates complications. The Busan alliance was built on your marriage. Without it, there is instability. We are here to offer resolution. Jin-woo answered in English, forcing them to work in his language, his country on his terms. There is no resolution. I'm not coming back. That life is over. The old man's face didn't change, but his eyes hardened imperceptibly. Perhaps you misunderstand. We are not asking. Your brother has agreed to honor the marriage contract in your place. This satisfies the alliance. But the matter of your children remains unresolved. The temperature in the room dropped. Jin-woo felt it in his bones, the shift from negotiation to threat, from diplomacy to violence wrapped in silk. What about my children? They are heirs to your father's legacy. This cannot be ignored. We propose they be raised in Seoul. Proper education. Proper protection. Proper understanding of their heritage. You and Miss Mensa would be compensated generously for this sacrifice. You want me to sell my children? We want them to have the life their grandfather would have wanted. The life their blood entitles them to. They are Park family. They belong with the Park family. Jin-woo stood slowly, deliberately. This meeting is over. Get out. The old man's courtesy evaporated like morning dew. Sit down, boy. You walk away from this table, and we stop being polite. We stop pretending this is a negotiation. I stopped being polite the day I left my wedding. You want my children? Come try to take them. See what happens when you declare war on someone who has nothing left to lose. You have Miss Mensa to lose. You have your children's safety to lose. You have your own life to lose. Don't pretend you have nothing at stake. Jin-woo leaned forward, his voice dropping to something cold and final. Here's what you don't understand. I'm not my father. I don't care about empires. I don't care about legacy. I don't care about saving face or maintaining alliances. I care about 3 people, and I've already arranged that if anything happens to them, anything at all, everything I know about the Park family operations goes to the FBI, the Korean National Police, and the New York Times simultaneously. Every account, every connection, every politician on the payroll, every body buried in the last 30 years, every secret my father kept. You're bluffing. Try me, please. I'm begging you to try me so I can watch your entire world burn. The old man stared at him for a long moment, recalculating, reassessing the man before him. Then he stood, his men following his lead. You've made an enemy of people who do not forgive. I've made a choice. There's a difference. They left. Jin-woo waited until he heard the building door close, counted to 100, then collapsed against the wall, heart hammering, hands shaking so badly he had to clasp them together. He'd just threatened one of the most powerful criminal organizations in Asia, with nothing but documents and determination, and the willingness to destroy everything his father built. It was the stupidest, bravest thing he'd ever done. His phone rang. Nana. They came, didn't they? Yes. What did they want? Everything. I gave them nothing. He paused, listening to her breathe. They wanted the twins. Wanted to take them to Seoul, raise them in that world. Her intake of breath was sharp. Over my dead body. That's what I told them, in slightly more diplomatic terms. He heard the twins playing in the background of the call. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. The sounds of a life worth destroying empires to protect. Worth burning every bridge for. Jin-woo, we can't run forever. Eventually they'll find a way. I know. So what do? We live. We live so completely and so honestly that they can't touch us without exposing themselves. We live in the light instead of the shadows. We make sure everyone knows who we are, and who those children are. We take away their greatest weapon. What weapon is that? Secrecy. They operate in the dark, in the spaces between laws and witnesses. We're going to shine every light we have on ourselves. Make it impossible for them to move against us without everyone seeing. Over the next month, Jin-woo did something unprecedented in his world. Something that made his father's old associates whisper about madness and suicide. He went public. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But deliberately. Methodically. Each step calculated to make himself and his family too visible to disappear quietly. He gave an interview to a Korean-American journalist about leaving his father's business to raise his children. Didn't name the organization explicitly. Didn't have to. Everyone who mattered knew who Park Jin-woo was. Knew what walking away meant. Knew the price such defiance usually carried. He enrolled the twins in a good school under their full names. Park Ji-woo and Park Mi-sun. Half Korean. Half Ghanaian. Living proof that their father wasn't hiding them. Living proof that any threat against them would have witnesses, teachers, friends, parents of classmates who would ask questions if something happened. He started a legitimate security consulting business, using his knowledge of organized crime to help companies protect themselves from it. Built a reputation as someone who understood the underworld but operated in daylight, who could recognize threats others missed because he'd been trained in that world from childhood. And he married Nana. Not in secret. Not in hiding. In a small ceremony in Brooklyn with 40 guests and photographs that ended up on social media. Tagged and dated and impossible to deny. The daughter-in-law his father never acknowledged. The woman who raised his grandchildren alone while Jin-woo played at being dutiful. Now Jin-woo's wife in every way that mattered, before God and witnesses and the law. His brother called the day after the wedding. Jin-woo was still in bed with Nana, both of them exhausted and happy, when the phone rang. You're making this worse. They see this as disrespect. As flaunting your betrayal. Rubbing their faces in your defiance. Let them see it however they want. I'm done living in fear of what they think. Father would be ashamed. Father was ashamed of everything that made him human. Every soft emotion. Every moment of weakness. I'm not making his mistakes. I won't die alone in a hospital room, surrounded by people who fear me but don't love me. Min-jae was quiet for a long moment. Then, the Busan family is pushing hard. They want blood for the insult. They say you made them look weak, that other families are questioning their strength. I'm holding them off, but I can't do it forever. Why are you holding them off at all? Because you're still my brother. Because those children are still family, still carry Park blood. Because father was wrong about a lot of things, but he was right that family protects family. Even when it's stupid. Even when it costs us. Jin-woo felt something crack in his chest. The last piece of bitterness he'd been carrying, the resentment toward his brother for being their father's perfect soldier. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There's a price for this protection. Of course there is. There's always a price. Min-jae sighed, and for the first time Jin-woo heard exhaustion in his brother's voice. The Busan family will accept a settlement. Financial compensation for the broken alliance, for the loss of face. $5 million American. I can cover $2 million from family funds without questions, without the council knowing. You need to find the other 3. That's impossible. I have nothing. My accounts are frozen, my assets seized. I'm working a startup consulting business that barely pays rent. Then you better get creative. Because if you don't have that money in 60 days, my protection ends. And what happens next won't be polite men in suits making threats. It'll be a car that doesn't stop at a crosswalk. A gas leak that wasn't there yesterday. An accident that takes everything you love and leaves you alive to suffer. 60 days. 60 days. I'm sorry, brother. It's the best I could do. Jin-woo hung up. Stared at his phone like it might offer answers. $3 million. He had a 2-year-old consulting business that generated maybe $30,000 in revenue if he was lucky. A rented apartment. A family that depended on him. He had no access to his father's money. No contacts in the criminal world who would loan him anything without expecting him to compromise everything he'd walked away to protect. No way to raise that kind of money legally in 2 months. He was trapped. Again. Always trapped by the world he thought he'd escaped. Nana found him on the fire escape an hour later. The twins were asleep in their room, exhausted from the wedding excitement. The city hummed below them. Millions of people living their ordinary lives, unaware of the underworld wars being fought in their shadows. She sat beside him without speaking. Just being there. The way she'd always been there when he needed her most, offering presents instead of solutions. They want $3 million. She laughed. Not from humor. From the absurdity of it, the impossible gap between their reality and the demand. We don't have $3,000 in savings. I know. So what are we going to do? Run. Hide. Spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Jin-woo looked at her. Really looked at her. This woman who'd survived 5 years alone in a foreign country. Who'd worked 2 jobs while pregnant, standing on her feet for 12-hour shifts while her body changed and ached. Who'd raised 2 children without help, without family, without the safety net most people took for granted. Who'd built a life from nothing because she had to, because giving up wasn't in her vocabulary. She wasn't weak. She'd never been weak. She was the strongest person he'd ever known. We're going to do what you did. We're going to survive. We're going to find a way. How? I have one thing they want more than money. One thing that might be worth $3 million to the right people. What's that? Information. Everything I know. Everything my father told me. Everything I saw and heard and learned growing up in that world. Over the next 2 weeks, Jin-woo made calls to people he'd sworn he'd never contact again. Not criminals. Not his father's associates. Law enforcement. Federal prosecutors who'd been trying to crack his father's organization for 20 years, who'd watched the Park family operate with impunity, while they collected evidence that never quite stuck. He told them he had everything. Every detail of every operation his father ran. Every connection to legitimate business. Every politician on the payroll. Every judge who looked the other way. Every cop who provided warnings. Every body buried, location and cause of death. Every dollar laundered through which banks and shell companies. Everything. And he'd give it to them. All of it. In exchange for 3 things. First, $3 million deposited in an offshore account that would be released to the Busan family as settlement. Blood money buying peace. Second, immunity for himself, his wife, and his brother from any prosecution related to his father's activities. Protection from the consequences of the information he was selling. Third, witness protection if needed. Not permanent. Not immediately. Just the option. Just knowing that if things went bad, if the information leak was traced back to him despite precautions, there was somewhere to run. The prosecutors smelled blood in the water, like sharks scenting chum. They'd give him anything for what he was offering. The Park organization was a prize they'd been chasing for decades. A white whale that had always slipped away. Jin-woo was handing them the harpoon. But there was a cost he hadn't fully calculated. The information he was selling wasn't just about his father. It touched dozens of other organizations. Implicated hundreds of people. would trigger investigations that would reshape the Korean criminal landscape, create power vacuums that would be filled with violence as ambitious men fought for control. People would die because of what he was about to do. People who worked for his father. People who trusted the organization's silence. Who'd built lives assuming their secrets were safe. People who had families of their own. Children who would grow up without fathers. Wives who would become widows. Jin-woo thought about this for exactly one night. Lay awake beside Nana, listening to her breathe, thinking about all the lives he was about to destroy. Then he signed the deal. Because at the end of everything, he'd chosen his family over his father's family. He'd chosen love over loyalty. He'd chosen the future over the past. And he'd live with the consequences, would carry the weight of those deaths for the rest of his life. But his children would be safe. That was all that mattered. The money transferred on day 58. His brother confirmed receipt. The Busan family accepted settlement. The alliance was broken, but the debt was paid. Jin-woo Park was officially free of his father's world. Except freedom is never that simple. Freedom always comes with a price. The federal raids started 3 weeks later. Seoul, Los Angeles, New York, San Francisco. Simultaneous operations coordinated across multiple agencies that took down 63 people in the Park organization's network. His father's advisors dragged from their homes in handcuffs. His father's soldiers arrested at restaurants and nightclubs. His father's connections in business and government exposed, careers ended, legacies destroyed. The Korean media went insane. The biggest organized crime bust in 20 years. Front-page news in Seoul, Tokyo, New York. All from a single source. A whistleblower. An insider who gave them everything. It took the underworld exactly 4 days to figure out who the insider was. Jin-woo's phone exploded with threats. Death threats. Threats against Nana. Against the twins, with details that made his blood run cold. What school they attended, what time they were dropped off, what their teacher's name was. People he'd known his entire life who'd attended his birthday parties as a child, promising to make him watch his children suffer before they killed him slowly. He changed their number. Increased security again. Hiring more former military, who understood how to spot and neutralize threats. Moved again, this time to a suburb outside Philadelphia. Far enough from New York's Korean community that they could blend in. Close enough to a federal building that help was 10 minutes away if needed. And he waited for the revenge that would inevitably come. That always came in his father's world. Violence answered with violence. Betrayal answered with blood. But something strange happened. Something Jin-woo hadn't anticipated. The revenge didn't come. Not the way he expected. Not at all. Instead, his brother called again 3 weeks after the raids. You destroyed everything father built. 70 years of organization. 3 generations of careful construction. Gone in 3 weeks of federal raids. Do you understand what you've done? Jin-woo braced himself for the condemnation, for the hatred. I understand I protected my family. You didn't just protect your family. Min-jae's voice was strange, not angry but something else. You started a war. The organizations that survived the raids are fracturing. Fighting over the pieces. And they blame you for all of it. There's a price on your head in 6 countries. Good. Let them fight each other instead of coming for us. Min-jae laughed. It was an ugly sound, but not directed at Jin-woo. You still don't get it. I'm not calling to threaten you. I'm calling to thank you. What? You freed me. All of us. Father's empire was a prison, and we were all trapped maintaining something that should have died decades ago. The old ways, the violence, the constant fear. You burned it down. Now we can build something different. Something smaller. Something that doesn't consume suns and spit out monsters. Jin-woo didn't trust this. Couldn't trust this. Everything in his training said this was a trap. Where's the trap? No trap. Just the truth. I'm out too. Took what money survived the raids and went legitimate. Construction. Real estate development. Boring things that don't require violence or secrecy. Some of the others are doing the same. The smart ones anyway. The stupid ones will war until they're dead or imprisoned. Let them. And the Busan family? They're dealing with their own problems. Their daughter married someone else last month. someone equally ambitious, someone who'll strengthen them in different ways. She's happy, I think. Or as happy as people like us get to be. She sent me a picture. She's pregnant. Jin-woo felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real hope. You're really out? I'm really out. And little brother? Those children deserve to know their uncle. When you're ready. No pressure. But family is family, even when it's complicated. Especially when it's complicated. The call ended. Jin-woo sat in his new living room in his new suburb watching his children play with toys bought from legitimate money earned from legitimate work. Nana was at nursing school. She'd decided after everything that she wanted to save people instead of just survive them. Wanted to use her hands to heal instead of just work. He was building furniture for their new house. Clean wood from Home Depot. Simple designs from YouTube tutorials. Things he made with his own hands instead of inherited from blood money and violence. Each piece imperfect but honest. This was his life now. This was his choice. And despite everything, despite the threats and the fear and the knowledge that somewhere people wanted him dead, he was happier than he'd ever been in his father's world of wealth and power. That night, he told the twins a story. Not about princes and princesses in some distant kingdom. About a man who had to choose between a kingdom and a family. About how choosing love over power was the hardest and best thing he ever did. The twins asked if it was a true story. Jin-woo looked at Nana. She smiled. She knew. Yes. It's a true story. It's our story. Ji-woo, his son, considered this seriously. Did the man ever miss his kingdom? Every day. But he loved his family more. That's what made him brave instead of foolish. Mi-sun, his daughter, crawled into his lap. I'm glad he chose us. Me too, baby. Me too. 5 years passed. The Park organization became a case study in law schools, a cautionary tale about the fall of modern crime families. The great dismantling. How one insider brought down an empire that had seemed untouchable. Jin-woo's name was redacted in public documents, but everyone in the underworld knew. He became a legend of a different kind. The heir who walked away. The prince who burned the castle to save the prisoners. Some saw him as a traitor. Some saw him as a hero. Jin-woo didn't care about either version. He cared about coaching his son's soccer team. About the way Ji-woo's face lit up when he scored a goal. About watching his daughter's dance recitals. About Mi-sun's grace and confidence. About kissing his wife in the kitchen while dinner burned, because they were too caught up in each other to care about the smoke alarm. He cared about ordinary things that his father never had time for, never valued, never understood could be more precious than power. His brother visited twice a year. Brought presents for the twins, thoughtful things, not expensive things. Talked about construction projects and zoning laws, and all the boring things that filled a legitimate life. They never talked about their father. Never talked about the old days, about the violence they'd witnessed or participated in. That world was gone. They'd both survived it. That was enough. And then one day Jin-woo got a letter. Hand-delivered by courier. Expensive paper with Korean watermarks. Formal Seoul. Inside was a photograph. His father's grave. Well-maintained. Fresh flowers. White chrysanthemums, the traditional flowers of mourning. The note said, he was wrong about many things, but he would have been proud of your strength, even if he never could have said it. Your cousins honor his memory. We honor your choice. Live well. Raise those children to be better than we were. It was unsigned. But Jin-woo knew the handwriting. His father's sister, Aunt Hae-won. The aunt who'd taught him to play chess when he was 6. Who'd told him once, in a moment of rare honesty, that the strongest men know when to walk away from the board before they lose everything that matters. He showed Nana the letter that night. She read it twice carefully. Does this change anything? No. But it's nice to know some people understand. That not everyone in that world thinks I'm just a traitor. She touched his face, her fingers tracing the lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. I never doubted you. Not for a second. I doubted me. Every day in the beginning. Wondered if I made the right choice. Wondered if I was being selfish. If I was trading other people's safety for my family's. Were you? Maybe. Probably. But I was also being human. My father forgot how to be human. I refused to make that mistake. The twins crashed through the door, arguing about whose turn it was to pick the movie for family night. 9 years old now. Growing up too fast. Growing up safe. Growing up knowing their father chose them over everything else, that they were worth more than kingdoms. That was the legacy Jin-woo wanted. Not empire. Not power. Not fear or respect earned through violence. Just love. Complicated, messy, imperfect love that chose people over principles, that chose presence over prestige, that chose truth over tradition. His father built an empire that lasted 70 years. Jin-woo was building a family that would last generations. And in the end, that was the greater victory. Years later, when the twins were teenagers asking questions about their grandfather, about the world Jin-woo came from, he told them the truth. Not all of it. Not the violence in detail. Not the blood or the bodies or the nightmares. But enough. He told them about a man who believed strength was control, who built power from fear, who loved his sons but didn't know how to show it except through demand and duty, through preparing them for a world of violence. He told them about walking away from a wedding, about choosing them over everything else his life had been designed to be, over 70 years of family legacy. And he told them the most important thing, the lesson he'd learned at the cost of everything. People will try to tell you that loyalty means never leaving, that family means accepting everything, even abuse, even being broken, that love means sacrifice. But sometimes the greatest loyalty is knowing when to say no. Sometimes family means creating something new. Sometimes love means choosing the people who need you most, even when it costs you everything. The twins listened, their faces serious. Ji-woo asked, "Do you regret it?" "Every choice has regret built into it. I regret the pain it caused people who didn't deserve it. I regret the people hurt in the raids, the families broken. I regret that your grandfather died thinking I betrayed him. Those regrets will never go away." "But do you regret us?" "Never. Not for 1 second. You two and your mother are the only things I ever got completely right." Mi-sun smiled, her eyes wet. "Then it wasn't a betrayal. It was a rescue." Jin-woo felt his eyes burn. Yes, that's exactly what it was. You understood in one sentence what took me years to accept. That night, Nana found him on their porch. They'd bought a house with a porch 2 years ago. A house with a yard where the twins played basketball. A house that didn't require security systems or panic rooms or escape routes planned for every contingency. Just a home. You did good. With them. With all of this. We did good. I couldn't have survived any of this without you. You were strong when I didn't know how to be. She leaned against him, her weight familiar and comforting. Sometimes I think about that photograph you got. The twins. What if it had arrived 5 minutes later? What if you'd already been at the altar, already said the words? I don't know. Maybe I would have gone through with it. Maybe I wouldn't have had the courage to walk away. Maybe I would have lived my whole life wondering about them. But you did walk away. But I did. And I'd do it again. Every time. They sat in comfortable silence. 15 years together. 5 years before the twins, when love felt simple. 10 years after, when love became everything. Through everything. Through impossible choices and consequences that rippled across oceans. Through poverty and fear and rebuilding. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I'd told you I was pregnant? If I'd called you instead of running? Every day. But I understand why you didn't. You were protecting me. Protecting them. You saw what I couldn't see yet. What's that? That sometimes love means letting go. And sometimes it means holding on so tight that the whole world can't pull you apart. She kissed him. Slow. Sweet. The way they'd kissed at Columbia when the world was simpler. When they believed love could conquer anything. Before they knew that love could be a war you fought with everything you had. I'd choose you again. Every single time. Even knowing how hard it would be. Jin-woo pulled her closer. Good. Because you're stuck with me forever. Till death do us part, and probably after that too. The porch light flickered. Inside, the twins laughed at something on TV. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. The sounds of a life built from ashes and choices and courage. Jin-woo had been trained from birth to inherit an empire. Instead, he inherited 2 children and a woman who made him believe happiness was possible. He traded power for presence, legacy for love, an empire for a family, and he'd never been richer. The end came not with violence but with time. 20 years after he walked away from his wedding, 30 years after he first met Nana in that Columbia University library, her studying for nursing prerequisites, him pretending to study economics while actually reading philosophy, Jin-woo stood at his daughter's graduation. Mi-sun had become a lawyer. Not corporate law with its easy money. Civil rights. She fought for people who couldn't fight for themselves, took cases others avoided. She'd inherited his sense of justice and Nana's unwavering courage. Her mother's refusal to accept that anything was impossible. Ji-woo was in his final year of medical school, following his mother's path into healing, choosing to save lives instead of the violence that had defined the Park family for generations, breaking every pattern, proving that blood didn't have to be destiny. Jin-woo watched them accept their achievements and felt something his father never allowed himself to feel. Pride without possession, love without control, joy without the need to shape it into something useful, something that served a greater purpose. His brother stood beside him. Min-jae had brought his own family. 2 daughters who'd grown up knowing their cousins, knowing the story of the uncle who chose differently, knowing that family meant more than blood and business. They were friends, the 4 cousins. Real friends, not the calculated alliances of the old world. Nana squeezed his hand. We did it. You did it. You raised them when I wasn't there. You loved them enough for both of us until I could find my way home. You were always the strong one. She shook her head. You found your way home the moment you saw that photograph. Everything after was just the journey. Just us learning how to be a family. That night, the whole family gathered. Jin-woo's children and their partners. Min-jae's family. Friends who'd become family over decades of shared meals and shared struggles. People who knew the story and loved them anyway. Who didn't care about the darkness in his past. Someone asked Jin-woo to tell it. The story. The choice. The moment everything changed. He looked around the table. At the life he'd built. At the people who existed because he'd been brave enough to say no to his father and yes to love. 30 years ago, I was supposed to marry someone I respected but didn't love. I was supposed to unite 2 criminal empires. I was supposed to make my father proud, to be the heir he'd trained me to be since I could walk. And then I received a photograph of 2 children I didn't know existed. My children. And in that moment, I had to decide who I was going to be. The table was silent. Even the people who knew the story leaned forward, caught by something in his voice. I chose them. I chose their mother. I chose love over legacy, family over empire, presence over power. And that choice cost me everything my father built, and gave me everything that actually mattered. It cost me my inheritance and gave me a home. It cost me my father's approval and gave me my own. Mi-sun spoke up, her voice quiet. Did you ever regret it? Jin-woo smiled. I regret that I wasn't there from the beginning. I regret that your mother had to be strong alone for so long. I regret the pain my choice caused people who didn't deserve it. But regret you? Regret this life? Never. Not even on the hardest days. Ji-woo raised his glass, his voice strong. To the man who chose love. The table echoed. To love. To family. To choices that change everything. Jin-woo looked at Nana. She was crying. Happy tears. The kind that come when you realize the story you've been living has a beautiful ending after all. That every hard moment was worth it. Later, when everyone had left and it was just the 2 of them cleaning up, Nana found an old photograph. The one that had been slipped under Jin-woo's door 30 years ago. The twins at 4 years old, their faces serious and beautiful. The image that changed everything. Why did you keep this? Because it reminds me of the moment I became who I was supposed to be. Not the heir. Not the son my father wanted. Just a father who loved his children enough to burn down everything else. She tucked the photograph back in his wallet. You were always that person. You just needed a reason to believe it. That night, Jin-woo dreamed of his father. In the dream, they sat across from each other the way they had that last day. But this time, his father spoke differently without anger. You were braver than me. I built an empire because I was afraid of being nothing. You walked away from everything because you knew you were already something. Already enough. Jin-woo woke up with tears on his face. Nana stirred beside him. You okay? Yeah. Just saying goodbye to ghosts. Just making peace with the past. She understood. She always understood. The years continued their patient march. Jin-woo grew old watching his children build their own lives, make their own choices. Watching his grandchildren grow up free from the weight of criminal legacy, free to be whoever they wanted to be without the shadow of the Park name dictating their futures. He and Nana traveled, saw the world without looking over their shoulders, without wondering if every stranger was a threat. Walked through Seoul not as a fugitive, but as a man who'd made peace with his past, who could visit his father's grave without fear or anger. They visited that grave once, all four of them. Together. The twins came too. It felt important somehow. Closing a circle that had been open for too long. Jin-woo stood over the headstone. Park Dae-young. Beloved father. Feared leader. Complicated man who never learned that strength and vulnerability weren't opposites. I forgive you. For not understanding. For building a cage and calling it legacy. For loving me the only way you knew how. Which wasn't enough but was all you had. I forgive you. And I hope, wherever you are, you've found the peace you never let yourself have in life. They left flowers. Not expensive imported ones. Just simple flowers from the Seoul market. The kind normal families leave for their dead, bought with love instead of obligation. As they walked away, Mi-sun asked, do you think he would have been proud eventually? Jin-woo considered, choosing his words carefully. I think he would have been confused. Pride requires understanding, and he never understood choosing people over power. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's enough that I understand. That you understand. That this family knows what matters. 25 years after walking away from his wedding, 35 years after meeting Nana in that library, 40 years after being born into a world that tried to shape him into something he wasn't, Jin-woo Park sat on his porch and realized something profound. He was happy. Not the complicated happiness that comes with achievement. Not the proud happiness that comes with legacy. Just the simple, uncomplicated happiness of a man who chose love and built a life around that choice. Pure happiness, earned through sacrifice and courage. His phone rang. An unknown number. Korean country code. Seoul. He almost didn't answer. But something made him pick up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the sense that some chapters need proper endings. The voice on the other end was elderly. Formal. Speaking in Korean so pure it had to be from the old generation. The one that remembered when honor still meant something beyond leverage. Park Jin-woo? This is Kwon Sung-min. I was your father's accountant for 40 years. Jin-woo remembered. The man who'd managed his father's legitimate holdings, the boring parts of the empire that didn't involve violence. I know who you are. How can I help you? I'm dying. Cancer. The doctors give me weeks left, maybe less. And before I go, I needed to tell you something. Your father left instructions. Secret instructions. In case you ever walked away. Jin-woo's heart hammered. After everything. After 30 years. What kind of instructions? He set aside money. $20 million. In a trust managed through legitimate channels. Clean money from investments he made decades ago, before the organization became what it was. Money that was never touched by the criminal side, never laundered, never connected to violence. That's impossible. Father cut me off, he said. What he said and what he did were different things, as they often are with proud men. The old man's voice was gentle, understanding. He was angry, hurt, betrayed by what he saw as your weakness. But he was also a father. And fathers protect their children even when they don't understand them, even when they're furious with their choices. Jin-woo couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. There are conditions. Very specific conditions he insisted on. The money can only be used for education, medical expenses, or starting legitimate businesses. It cannot be accessed until your children turn 40. It cannot be used to rebuild the organization or enter criminal enterprise. Your father was very specific about that. He wanted to make sure they were free, that they built their own lives first, proved they could stand on their own. Why are you telling me now? Why wait 30 years? Because your son turns 40 next month, and your daughter the month after. The trust activates on their birthdays. They'll receive letters from the law firm explaining everything. I wanted you to know first. Wanted you to understand that your father loved you. He just didn't know how to love you and respect your choice at the same time. Those two things were at war in him until he died. The call ended. Jin-woo sat there, phone in hand, tears streaming down his face. After everything. After walking away. After the threats and the fear and the years of rebuilding. His father had protected them anyway. Had ensured his grandchildren would have opportunities, would have a safety net, would have the freedom to choose their own paths. It was the most loving thing his father had ever done. And he'd done it in secret, unable to reconcile his anger with his love, unable to bend enough to say the words, but unwilling to leave his grandchildren unprotected. Nana came out to the porch. What happened? You're crying. He told her. Everything. The trust. The money. The conditions that ensured it could only be used for good. The love that traveled through time and silence and pride too stubborn to bend, but not stubborn enough to abandon. She sat beside him, processing. He never stopped being their grandfather. Even though he never met them, never acknowledged them. No. He never did. He protected them the only way he knew how. From a distance, through lawyers and trusts and money that would activate when they were old enough to use it wisely. They told the twins together the next day. Watched their faces process the information. The grandfather they'd never met, who died thinking their father was a traitor. The empire they'd never known. The love that found a way through anger and death itself. Ji-woo spoke first, his voice thoughtful. What do we do with it? That's a lot of money. A lot of responsibility. Whatever you want. It's yours. Free and clear. Build something. Help people. Save it for your own children. Just make sure whatever you do makes you happy and does some good in the world. That's all that matters. Mi-sun smiled. And Jin-woo saw Nana in that smile, saw the determination that had carried his wife through 5 years alone. We could start a foundation. Help kids from families like ours. Kids whose parents are in gangs or organized crime. Give them options grandfather never gave you. Paths out of that world. Jin-woo felt his heart swell with pride so profound it hurt. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. He'd hate it and love it at the same time. And so the Park Family Foundation was born. Not built on blood money or criminal enterprise. Built on love that found a way through anger and time and death itself. Built on his father's final gift, his last attempt at redemption. Jin-woo worked with his children to establish it, spending months on the details. Organizations helping children escape gang life. Scholarships for kids from organized crime families wanting different paths, wanting to go to college instead of following their fathers into violence. Support groups for families dealing with the aftermath of choosing love over loyalty, of walking away from criminal life. The irony wasn't lost on him. His father's money, his father's final gift, being used to help people escape everything his father built, everything he believed in, being used to prove that blood wasn't destiny, that children of criminals could become doctors and lawyers and teachers. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that was his father's redemption. The thing he couldn't say in life but could accomplish in death. Maybe in the end, the old man finally understood what Jin-woo had been trying to tell him all along. Legacy isn't what you build. It's who you love. It's the choices you make. It's the freedom you give the people who come after you. It's breaking the cycles instead of perpetuating them. 30 years after that photograph slipped under his door. 30 years after walking away from a wedding, from an empire, from everything he'd been raised to become. 30 years after choosing love over everything else his life was designed to be. Jin-woo Park sat surrounded by children and grandchildren, and people who loved him not for what he inherited, but for who he became. Not for the power he wielded, but for the power he refused. Not for the empire he could have ruled, but for the family he chose to build instead. And he understood finally, completely, that he'd made the right choice. His father built an empire that lasted 70 years. Jin-woo built a family that would last forever. Not through power. Not through fear. Through love. Through choice. through the courage to say no to the wrong life, so he could say yes to the right one. The story comes full circle where it began, with a choice. But this time, it's his grandson asking the question. Mi-sun's son, 6 years old with his mother's determination and his great-grandmother's Ghanaian features mixed with Korean bone structure. Grandpa, if you had to do it all over again, would you choose the same thing? Would you still walk away? Jin-woo looked at the little boy. 6 years old. Curious. Innocent. Free in ways Jin-woo had never been at that age. Free from the weight of criminal legacy. Free to become whoever he wanted without the shadow of the Park name dictating his future. Every single time. Without hesitation. Without doubt. I would choose love. I would choose family. I would choose you and your mother and your uncle and your grandmother. Every single time. Why? Wasn't being powerful better? Power fades like morning mist. Empires crumble to dust. Fear dissipates when the source of that fear dies. But love. Love is the only thing that lasts. Love is the only thing worth fighting for. Love is the only legacy that matters, the only thing you leave behind that actually changes the world. The little boy thought about this seriously, his face scrunched in concentration. Then he smiled, that beautiful, uncomplicated smile of childhood, and ran off to play with his cousins. And Jin-woo watched him go, knowing that this child would grow up never understanding the weight of the choice his grandfather made, never feeling the crushing pressure of criminal dynasty expectations. And that was the greatest gift of all. Freedom. Choice. Love without conditions. Safety without fear. The chance to become yourself instead of what your ancestors demanded. That was the empire Jin-woo Park built. And it was greater than anything his father ever imagined. More valuable than all the money and power and influence the Park organization had accumulated over 70 years. He'd traded gold for happiness. Empire for presence. Fear for love. And he'd won. Nana came out to join him on the porch, moving a little slower now, both of them showing their age. But her hand still fit perfectly in his. Her presence still made him feel complete in ways nothing else ever had. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "That photograph. The one that changed everything. How one moment, one choice, can redirect your entire life. How close I came to making the wrong choice, to walking down that aisle, and spending the rest of my life wondering about what might have been. But you didn't. But I didn't. I saw their faces and I knew. I knew with absolute certainty that nothing else mattered. Not my father's approval, not the empire, not the carefully constructed alliances. Just them. Just you. Just the family we could build together if I was brave enough to try." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You were always brave. You just needed a reason to show it. You were my reason. You and the twins. You gave me permission to be human instead of a weapon. To choose love instead of duty. To build instead of destroy." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over their neighborhood, over the ordinary suburban street where they'd built their extraordinary life. Inside, their family laughed and talked and lived, creating new memories, new stories, new legacies built on love instead of fear. Jin-woo Park had been born into darkness. Into a world where strength meant violence and love was weakness. Where family meant obligation and choice was an illusion. But he'd chosen light. Chosen a different path. Chosen to break every pattern. To refuse every lesson his father taught about power and control. And in choosing, he'd become free. Free to love without fear. Free to raise children who would never know the weight he'd carried. Free to build something that would outlast any empire, any dynasty, any accumulation of power and wealth. He'd built a family. A real family, bound not by blood obligation or criminal enterprise, but by choice and love and the daily decision to show up for each other. That was his legacy. That was his empire. And as the sun set on another ordinary beautiful day, Jin-woo understood with perfect clarity that he'd won the only victory that mattered. He'd chosen love. And love had chosen him back. And that made him the richest man in the world.